We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi everyone, welcome to In the Weeds, and our special guest, Jamie Pearson, is with us. She's actually coming to us from the beautiful state of Montana. Jamie, thank you so much for making the effort to join me on In the Weeds today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, your reputation precedes you. You've been named one of the most influential women in the cannabis industry, according to High Times, and you are the CEO of Bhang Corporation. And every time I use that name, I always spell it immediately, B-H-A-N-G. Can you tell us a little bit about how your company got started and how you came up with that name?
Sure. So Bang is actually the Indian word for a cannabis drink in India. They've been drinking Bang, they call it Bong, for really over thousands of years. It's part of their, Ayurvedic and naturopathic way of life in India. So I often, when I'm out speaking or I'm doing events or putting myself out into the world, I often have people come up to me saying, "Hey, are you aware that Bang is an Indian word?" Yes, we're aware. And that was part of how the name was arrived at, because it wasn't well known in the US as such, but it was an homage to the people that have been using the cannabis plant as medicine for millennia. So that's how the name was arrived at. Our story is that we were born in Oakland, California, 10 years ago this month. We are celebrating a decade in the industry.
Congratulations, just like Kushko. Kushko's 10 years old too, I believe, and you guys could have a great party, I'm guessing, at this point too, out that way, but congratulations on that.
All wear masks and be 6 feet apart.
That's right. It's where we're at. So, yep.
Is a master chocolatier, chef de cuisine, Michelin-rated chef, and he had a 25-year career as a master chocolatier, putting gourmet chocolate in places like Whole Foods and Dean and DeLuca. About 11 years ago, he was doing an issue with a food scientist about one of his products. And the food scientist took a bong hit in the background, and he said, "Are you doing what I think you're doing?" And he said, "Yeah, and you should put cannabis in your chocolate." And, one thing led to another. He left his mainstream cannabis company or chocolate company and moved to Oakland and started a cannabis chocolate company. So when Bang started 10 years ago, we started with a chocolate product that was already beloved in the United States, was already well known for being high quality, had already met federal food standards, had nutritional fact panels, had product liability insurance. And all he did was added cannabis as an ingredient. So he definitely is being credited for raising the bar of cannabis edibles, because when he entered his chocolate bar, his dark chocolate bar, into the first High Times Cannabis Cup, his first High Times Cannabis Cup, and he won. The other products were in Ziploc bags with, Sharpie marker labels, right? So he tells the story often that 10 years ago when he did that, he would walk into dispensaries with his professionally packaged product that had lab testing that wasn't required in the industry, but he was used to doing that to meet Whole Food standards, and he wanted to know that he was getting the milligrams of THC correct, because he said people are using this as medicine. They need to be able to dose themselves correctly. So for 10 years, we've had end-to-end full bar every batch testing, way before 8 years before testing was required. He had a nutritional fact panel on the package, and he had Lloyd's of London product liability insurance. So fast forward, we're now in 9 states, and we are the number 1 and number 2 edible, not just chocolate, but edible in Canada.
Wow. Oh, that's a great thing for the resume, I guess, Jamie, for that one.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. Having Canada as a first, country, if you will, a G7 country to adopt legalization, has given a great opportunity for entrepreneurs and companies like yourselves to really take your business to a whole new level.
Mm-hmm. To a higher level.
Yeah, you can't help but deal with the puns in this business, right? You just can't.
I love puns. I'm the queen of puns, and I use them all intended. So
Okay.
yeah. Anyway.
So the Canadian market for you has been huge.
It's been huge. It's been huge for sure. The interesting thing is, having been doing cannabis in the, because I didn't get into the industry myself personally until it was legal. People know my story. My dad's been growing cannabis for 55 years. My cousin on my mom's side, first cousin and my best friend that I've grown up with, is DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill. So I have sort of the poster child of the cannabis legalization movement. Cypress Hill was out there, putting themselves in harm's way for the plant. And so on both sides of my family, there was no stigma, and everybody really acknowledged that the plant was making people feel better. And I was a college athlete, high school athlete, and really had no interest in smoking cannabis or being involved in cannabis. I went a more traditional route, went to college, got a master's degree, went to law school, and have a thriving real estate company. I still own it, and I still invest in real estate. But once cannabis went legal, and in Montana it was 15 plus years ago, the opportunity to make money in real estate, there was some cross section that happened. And what I'll tell you is that all of these years now that I've been in the traditional industry, let's say 6-7 years, I've watched different states make decisions, get some things right, get some things wrong. What I'll say about Canada is that Canada did a lot of things right, but they've got some issues that they need to iron out. And I think what I've noticed is that the municipalities and the states and the countries that approach cannabis with common sense instead of fear do better. And I think the fear is always tied to a loss of revenue, or there's going to be children using cannabis, or there's going to be, it's going to be mayhem, it's going to be chaos. And what typically ends up happening is people realize that people have been using cannabis for millennia, hence the name Bang. And it actually, and I go back to always my experience as a landlord, it actually is quite the opposite. So in states and in municipalities where cannabis has been legalized, the early onset rate of use actually goes up. So children don't have access to it because the black market gets shut down. And you see domestic violence rates drop, and you see drunk driving rates drop, and you see tax revenues go up, and you see this general, state of well-being actually envelop these communities. And I do believe, I myself made a 180 because I was this person that didn't believe in it, didn't want anything to do with it, saw it as a drug. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, Reagan war on drugs, and had the stigma. Like I was fully engulfed in the stigma. But I know now, after being in the industry for a long time and receiving letters and emails from Bang fans about first time I've been able to sleep in 20 years, or this has solved my pain, or I now have, anxiety is solved, or I can go out in public, like just crazy, miraculous stories. And people, athletes, we know Michael Phelps used it. We know Usain Bolt used it. This is, you know what I mean? This is a plant that actually has endocannabinoids, and we know that our body has an endocannabinoid system. And what we don't know is vast, but we know nobody's died from cannabis use. And so I'm like slowly but surely becoming an activist myself and a proponent for it. And what started off as a way to help my cousin and his band make a really good business deal is turned into a passion.
I can't tell you how many times I hear that passion from so many people that are in this industry. And it's exactly why I started this company, because I really did want people like yourselves to have an opportunity to tell those stories. And there's so many of them. We interviewed Bruce Barcott from Leafly about a month ago. And his book, Weed the People, is a must read for anybody who wants to understand what it was like in Colorado or in Washington State before they legalized, because he did a great job of documenting that. And he too went through that, I'm not sure about this. Should I vote for it? Should I not vote for it? And then had a friend who explained to him that it wasn't a drug issue, it's a civil rights issue. That this country has taken advantage of the institutionalized racism to kind of stop and put a whole race of people in our jails and in our prisons based on foolish possession laws. And we're now finally recognizing, Steve D'Angelo, the Last Prisoner Project, doing a great job of at least waving the flag of saying these things have to change. And this is some of the things that I talk to people about here and saying it's not about a gateway drug. It's not about an abusive product. It's about what this product does for people's and enhances their lives, not hurts their lives. And it, again, it's been used by our law enforcement people to fill up our jails. And that is wrong. And that's what really gets me mad, needless to say, as you can tell as I get up on my bandwagon, Jamie. And I know you share a lot of the same frustrations and passions for getting this plant legalized in the United States.
I do. I couldn't agree more. And I really had no idea. And Fab Five Freddy has a documentary on Netflix about the connection between the music industry, racism, marijuana, and incarceration rates. It's a must-see. There's so much going on right now where people are starting to wake up and realize that, I'm not a big fan of conspiracy theories, but because I don't believe one person woke up and said, oh, we got, let's do this to, let's do this to incarcerate people of color. But what I do think has happened is it's a amalgam of, this house of cards that's been built around keeping cannabis away from people that has enriched alcohol companies and big tobacco. And the reality is it's time for all of this to change. And we're all seeing the connection, and it's changing. So what I want companies to understand, and what I want especially Bang shareholders to understand, that's really, really clear to me now, is that this isn't me being a crunchy granola, tree hugging, feminist liberal, or whatever, all these labels that they put on us. This is me having the responsibility to deliver value to shareholders with the product that we're making, and always looking for an angle to do better. And when I want to do better, not just being socially conscious, but I want to deliver value to my shareholders. And what I'm finding is that cannabis use is consistent across demographics, race, age. People use cannabis because it makes them feel better. So why would I have a board full of white men and an executive team full of white men? Because I have nothing against white men. My son's a white man. I married a white man. It's not about being anti anything. It's about being inclusive, because the inclusion of the diversity makes us better. And the statistics actually show that when you have a diverse board and when you have a diverse executive team, companies tend to be 6 to 13% more profitable. So why wouldn't I give my company that edge? My Bang is 90% executive female run. We have a black man as our chairman of the board. And our top THC salesperson nationally is a Hispanic male. So we're out there walking the walk, and have been, since I came on board, because I brought that awareness to Bang. And it's an awareness of not just we're doing the right thing, it's we're doing what makes sense to make our company better and more profitable. Because I have the decision makers of these households sitting on my team saying, yeah, but did you think about this? Or have we thought about that? Those voices and that perspective brings value. And I would say to every company, not just cannabis company out there, it's time to have diversity in leadership because it makes all of us better.
100%. And we all know we're coming up on what will be a very pivotal election in November. And it's amazing to me that cannabis is right in the middle of the political debate. And because of the Republican-controlled Senate, okay, they don't even want cannabis involved in any COVID-19 recovery bills. They don't even want the name in there. And needless to say, nothing's getting done in Washington, D.C. because of the divisiveness that is part of what's going on in this country right now.
What I find so interesting about that conversation is that, you know, we're in 9 states. So I have this perspective from multiple states where in every one of those states where cannabis is legal that we are in, the doctors came to the legislators and said, please, please, please do not stop cannabis from happening right now, because what will happen is we're going to have drug seekers and you're going to tax a medical system that's already preparing for Armageddon. So across the board, cannabis has remained an essential service. And so we're seeing cannabis generating revenue and generating tax revenue, and people are being employed and paying their rent and, you know, shopping and doing the things that they need to do to keep the economy going in those states. A significant portion of that is coming from cannabis. Cannabis companies cannot apply for PPP loans or, you know, any of that, those federal funds to keep them propped up. Yet they keep going, and the industry keeps going because the demand for the plant is there. It's not going away. You're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. So the interesting part of that is, yes, it's weird though. The Republicans don't want cannabis involved in all of this. I always think you got to follow the money, and you go back to who's writing checks to keep those people elected. It's big pharma, it's big alcohol. And, you know, these are the people that have the most to gain by cannabis not being legalized. Now we're starting to see big alcohol and big pharma hedging their losses and actually investing in the industry, which I think eventually, you know, it'll be legal. I expect if there's not some sort of Hail Mary fireworks move at the end of the election to try to get some of the BIPOC communities on board with the Republican Party, it's a matter of time before we have federal legalization. But the last thing I want to say about that is, you know, essentially we have this tax revenue that's coming in. And if we look at history, at the end of the Great Depression, it was the end of the prohibition of alcohol that revitalized a portion of our, you know, economy. And a lot of people are expecting cannabis to give the same leg up. So I do think that there's pressure that even the Republicans are not going to be able to withstand if they don't do something.
And what's amazing to me, and you were making some great points, Jamie, Mitch McConnell is the one who signed the Farm Bill into law in December of 2018. I'm pretty sure that's when it all happened. And he didn't even realize the Pandora's box that he was opening when it came to CBD and that product that now the FDA and the DEA are pointing they're pointing fingers at each other to say, whose responsibility is this going to be? And needless to say, they can't come to any kind of conclusion, which again is a frustrating thing for everyone in this industry, because all that the people in the industry are looking for are some regulations when it comes to infusing sodas, waters, food products with CBD. I've never experienced the frustrations that I've had as an American that I've had over the last 4 years, let's just say. And you know I'm from Massachusetts, so you know which side I'm leaning on, right? Come on.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting as a business owner and then as the CEO of a publicly traded company. I've got lots of experience in business, just in basic going to get money, real estate deals, financing. I have employees, I'm paying taxes, I'm doing everything that every business owner is doing. And I believe that the majority of Americans have some connection to a small business, whether they own one or they're an employee of one. It isn't, we give tax breaks, crazy ones, to these large businesses. But America's built on the backs of small business. And I think about the cannabis industry having no tax breaks, not being able to do business across state lines, not being able to do banking, credit card processing. And I think about just the fact that these, I've got a friend that just got robbed the other day because in California, they publish the names and locations of all the cannabis businesses. So you as a consumer can look them up and see if they're legit, but not really understanding that you put all of these people at risk because everybody's having to do business in cash if they're directly touching the plant. And just this basic lack of understanding. But we're supposed to be a quote unquote free country, and the Republican values have to do with a free market society. And so you want to have the market speak about, what makes sense. You don't want to have too much government regulation. And so that it's this weird catch-22 that we're in, where you want to have fiscal responsibility, but you don't let people bank. We're losing out on, our banks are losing out on the opportunity to give small business loans and to give big business loans, make interest, take all these deposits. And so I think it's just a really interesting historical time. And it's the hardest business I've ever been in. And I learn something new every day. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see it change people's lives for the better. And I think the reason the people don't give up is precisely because of that. And the Steve D'Angelos of the world and the Jim Belushis of the world and the Nicks and, everyone in the industry, we all know what we're talking about when we say you're swimming upstream every single day. There is no quick riches. This is a hard business. And, I'm just happy to be part of it because I really admire the people that I consider my colleagues.
And wisely, and I'm right alongside you in all of those subjects and your opinions as well. Let's get lit back a little bit. You're a publicly traded company on the Canadian Stock Exchange, is that correct? Do you see the day of legalization where you will be able to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ?
I think that day's coming sooner than later. I do.
You're a hopeful person, Jamie. That's important, right? In fact, everybody in this industry is hopeful and positive. And, you're right about how difficult it is, because how many of you in the industry have had to bang your head, pardon the pun, against the wall just to get the same rights that any new industry or new business would have. You talked about the Safe Banking Act or the MORE Act or opening up the banks to the industry. We're talking about public safety and we're talking about civil rights, and cannabis is right in the middle of both of those debates, correct?
I couldn't agree more, but what I will tell you is I believe that what people need to understand more than that, I think you'll appeal to the general population when they understand some basic concepts. Like, give you an example. There's some conversation in New England area. Okay, Massachusetts is recreationally legal right now, but you have this disparity between New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. There's all these states around you that are looking at legalizing marijuana, and so you have either the voters vote for it or the legislators do it. And so hats off to Illinois. It was the first state that went legislatively recreational. And I think we're going to see some of these states in New England going legislatively recreational, hopefully in November. But what my point here is, you have an opportunity to crush the black market right now. The reality is, we're talking about defunding the police, and we're talking about, there's all of this backlash going on, and there's all of, police shooting black people and all this kind of stuff that's been going on and creating fear amongst the population. And the reality is, a huge part of what's being targeted is drugs, drug addiction, guns, gun violence, gangs, and all of these things that are typically funded through black market and illicit drug trade. And the reality is, if you were to legalize properly, this is Jamie's opinion, but it's born out of experience. What happened in California is that California put a recreational law into existence after many years of being medically legal. And what it did is it cost a fortune to go get a license, which excluded the small business owner. And then it brought in all of this, need for big business capital. Now, California went from 3,000 dispensaries down to about 300 overnight that were quote unquote legal. But what they didn't have was a way to shut down the legacy or illicit market. And my point is, we shouldn't be looking for ways to shut down the illicit market. It exists. What we should be looking for are ways to bring the illicit market into the legal market. So my example is in New York. New York is actually the largest user of cannabis in the United States. People don't realize that, but more cannabis goes through New York than goes through California, whether illegal or through the legacy market. If what New York did was said, look, cannabis is bought and sold here every day on every street corner. And if what we did is said, all right, every bodega that sells cannabis or sells cigarettes and alcohol can apply for a $1,000 cannabis license, and you just legislate it. And you say, we're going to let every corner store have cannabis. And then you really make sure that the manufacturers and that the growers are legislated heavily, and that it's expensive to become a grower and a manufacturer. If you look at the way alcohol has done it, everybody sells alcohol. There's only a handful of manufacturers, and their every move is monitored. You've already got a wheel invented. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. They could explode their tax revenue and have a good handle on the quality of product that goes to consumers and the amount of product that goes to consumers if they just follow that model. And they would shut the black market down, and they would solve a lot of crime, and they would solve a lot of gun violence, and they would be able to fix all the potholes in New York and New Jersey. And I think if the 5 states around them did that together and said, we're just gonna let every corner store sell joints and candy bars, I think that you would see a population of people, rather than walking around drunk or drunk driving, they'd be all mellowed out. And as a landlord, I always preferred to rent to people that smoke cannabis as opposed to drink alcohol. I found that the alcoholics were prone to getting DUIs, were prone to, having domestic violence. They get holes in the walls. You all know the stories. Mm-hmm. But my cannabis users tended to be very stable and, just not a lot of drama. And so I just imagine if we went from a country that consumes massive amounts of alcohol to a country that consumes cannabis, I think the whole world would be a better place. No question. That's my opinion. That's how we ought to get there.
Yeah, certainly you're not going to get any debate from me on that end. I'm not sure I have the same amount of faith in my gender, who are involved with a lot of the legislative bodies in America. And I'm talking about statewide and cities and towns. Men are very stubborn beings in so many ways. And while I'm making an assertion or a stereotype or a prejudice, undoing that, your speech for the High Times was breaking the glass ceiling. How do we how do we get past the fact that there's a lot of men out there who are looking to get a piece of the action, whether they are legislators or not, or they're business people, they're people who control capital in this country, and it's still mostly men. How do we explain to them what your message was, which is the power of diversity, and stop taking more for yourself and giving back to others, or giving others a shot? How do we do that?
Simply put, I believe that, again, you have to address fear, and it's this who moved my cheese mentality. And if people understand that the pot is so big and that there's enough for everybody, and you don't have to worry that you're going to get a piece. Make the pie bigger. Everybody wins, because I do believe cannabis is a gateway to wellness. I believe it is a gateway to people feeling better and to people behaving better, and to it's not a poison. So, when we're talking about dealing with a framework of business that continues to look exactly the same, my message to High Times, to the women in the audience was, we're in prohibition and we don't have to do things the way it's always been done. So, for example, there are women funds out there. I know of one, called Balco, that is specifically looking to place dollars with companies that are making products that do what they say they're going to do, and that specifically help the human condition. And they would like to give dollars to women-run businesses or women-led businesses or women-owned businesses. The minute Balco's placed that money and those dollars are being used in a way that generate revenue, then they'll have more revenue to give to other companies. And what I think happens is, you just have I love the fact that you asked me this question, because I wish people actually asked me this question more often, because this is like the area of my world that I'm most passionate about. And it's basically, how do we solve the patriarchy?
Right.
And I think the first answer is, you don't look at the patriarchy as evil, because I don't. I look at it as a framework. And I believe that if we're going to preach inclusion, which I do, then you have a way to include the patriarchy into the process. And I think it all comes back down to education and to addressing the root fear of, we're not going to have enough, or it's that whole make America great again. Well, what was America when America was great? What are you referring to when women and people of color didn't have rights? Right. Because America is pretty great all the time, and it just keeps getting better, in my opinion. So I would really like to see a great America where, we start learning from people that are doing great things. And there's so many examples of ways to do exactly what you're saying, but I think you always have to approach all of those questions with, to sound as cliche as it is, you have to approach it with love, and you have to approach it with kindness and with inclusion, and just address people's root fears right where they start, which is, there's enough for you too.
Right. Well, Jamie, you are 100% right on this. I loved our little discussion for In the Weeds today. I got to thank you again for making the effort to come on and have an opportunity to talk with me. I really believe that people like yourself, who are providing leadership in this country, can continue to make the difference that you are in your own world. And if everybody can work on their own little world, that greater good will happen as well. And I appreciate you taking the time and sharing some of your thoughts with us as well. When is Bhang going to come to Massachusetts and to the Northeast? I guess that's the question, because I understand that there aren't a lot of retail outlets in Massachusetts that are carrying your product.
There are none right now. And I have a little trick up my sleeve. I'm working on Massachusetts right now, and one of the big dilemmas that we've had is that you guys have a supply problem.
Yes.
So I kind of have been biding my time to see if you can get your supply problem solved. I think that solution's coming, and I think that you'll see Bhang in Massachusetts very soon, because I am working on something that's really promising.
Terrific. And if there's anything I can do, I am somewhat connected with that community in my state. I certainly know some of the operators, and I'd be happy to open up a few doors for you as well, because your product speaks for itself. You speak for your product beautifully, and I actually look forward to continuing our conversation and this open relationship that we've had to talk a little bit more about the world we're in and how the cannabis can play a role in actually improving both individually and around the world. And it's why I use this closing line, Jamie. It's a whole new world of weed out there. Let's all use it responsibly. And
Amen.
I believe that wholeheartedly, and I'm going to keep it going. So for Jamie Pearson from Bong Corporation, right? Did I say it right that time?
We call it Bang in the U.S.
I know it's a U.S., but it's derived from an Indian word, yes?
Correct.
Bong. So there's Bang, there's Bong, and there's Bong, right?
Right.
I told you I was a teacher of speech. That's what you got to do. There are 3 different ways to look at it. Anyway, Jamie, again, thank you so much. Please keep in touch. So for Jamie Pearson, I'm Jimmy Young, the host of In the Weeds. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We Talk Now, We Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge, and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.